Welcome to Cow Talks. I'm Chris Pravat, Beef Cattle and Forage Commodity Director for the Alabama Farmers Federation.
And I am Marcelo Wallau, Forage Extension Specialist with the University of Florida.
And this is our podcast, where we dive deep into the main topics affecting livestock and forage production in the southeastern United States.
From the mainstream media to new technologies straight from our research stations.
From cattle prices to international trade.
From our pastures and beyond.
Join us on this journey as we tackle the main issues affecting our producers and the sustainability of our production systems.
Hello and welcome to Cow Talks. This is Marcelo Wallau, your host, Forage Extension Specialist at the University of Florida. And today with me, co-hosting this episode is my colleague José Dubeux from the North Florida Research and Education Center in Marianna. Dr. Dubeux is a professor of forage agronomy with a research and extension appointment and has been in this podcast before when we talked about integrated systems and also other forage systems in North Florida. Welcome, Dubeux.
Good morning. Thanks, Marcelo. It's a pleasure to be here as always. Be excited to discuss about integrated crop livestock systems.
Fantastic. And today we have a special guest here coming directly from Brazil. Dr. Pedro Alburquerque is Assistant Professor of Forage Agronomy at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, and he came last week to talk in the first Southeastern Integrated Crop Livestock System Symposium that we hosted in Marianna, Florida. It was a fantastic symposium, lots of good conversations. And I brought Pedro in because of his experience. So he is currently a professor at the university there, but before, he worked for a milk co-op that involved 29 individual smaller co-ops serving 170,000 cooperated farmers in influencing about 500 million gallons of milk annually and 8.6 million acres of soybean. Pedro, welcome to Cow Talks, and thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks, Marcelo, and thank you, Dubeux. It's really a pleasure to me, frequent listener of your podcast. So I'm very honored to be here, and I'm happy to share a little part of my knowledge on crop livestock integration. So thank you so much.
Pedro, appreciate you being here again. And tell us a little bit more about your background in your past from academia into the industry and then back into academia now.
Okay, so I'm an agronomist with PhD in animal science. We were actually colleagues back there in Brazil, right, Wallau? And after my PhD studies, I went through a period as a postdoc. I had a postdoc internship, and then I had the opportunity to go to the industry to work with this topic, crop livestock integration, but also to provide information about forage production in our systems there in Brazil. As you said, it's a huge cooperative. We actually call it a central cooperative. And our mission there was to provide information to all 29 cooperatives with hundreds of milk producers, also soybean producers there, and all kinds of production. So yeah, great experience in this field. And nowadays, I'm a professor in forage agronomy, working especially with crop livestock integration and the effects actually of the grazing animals in all kinds of pastoral systems. They're integrated with agriculture and also pure grazing systems in our natural grassland there in Brazil.
So just to give our listeners a little bit of background, when we think about integrated crop livestock systems, we're talking about the integration of crop and livestock in multiple ways. It can be in different or similar times and space in a farm or in the landscape. What we think about that specifically in Florida, which is the main work we're developing here with Dubeux and several other colleagues, is specifically the integration of cattle grazing cover crops. And most of those is occurring during the winter, which is the season that we are right now. When we go around the state, you see a lot of bare ground, a lot of brown pastures, and a lot of hay feeding. And then we scratch our heads thinking a lot of this could be into winter pastures. Those center pivots could be growing oats and ryegrass to be grazed by stalkers and replacement heifers. Great opportunity here, still not a lot of use. Pedro, you bring a lot of experience in Brazil, both in the scientific side and also in the technical side, implementing those systems. From what you've seen here in this past week, you've been here with us and discussing, and then what you have in Brazil, especially the evolution of the implementation of those systems there that we accompanied through our academic career with our mentor there, Paulo Carvalho, and several other colleagues working on that. How can you compare and how can you see the potential here in the southeastern United States compared to what has been done in Brazil?
Well, we actually have a lot of similarities considering our state. I think it's important to say that we, and Marcelo, me and you, we come from the southernmost state in Brazil. So we're in the exact same latitude as Florida, but in the south. So it starts from there. So we have a lot of similarities, including climate. We have about the same yearly precipitation as you have here in Florida. So the opportunities are also very similar. Of course, we have some differences. I see your soils here are very, very sandy. In our state, we have more diverse soils, a more diverse soil matrix. So we have very clay soils in the north and very sandy soils also in the south. And also the forage matrix is similar. So in most of our systems, we have the main crops are soybeans, maize, and rice. I think we can say these are the main three crops. The integration occurs in the winter, grazing these forages, or we can say grazing these cover crops, which are basically the same species as you have here: ryegrass, oats, wheat, forage wheat, rye, all this, the same forages, also some legumes, but it's not that usual there. So a lot of similarities, also similarities when we talk about the main barriers we face there. We were talking during the symposium that here you have not more than 5% of integration, according to your estimations. There, we are considered, our state, Rio Grande do Sul, is considered the state that integrates more, but it means only 30%. So we have about 7 million hectares, which I'm not sure in acres what means, but about 7 million hectares cultivated with the main crops, soybean, maize, and rice, but only 2 million or 2.5 million with integration, according to estimation. So why not more? Why do we not have more? Because of these barriers, these myths that we are probably talking during these podcasts.
But still, I think one of the bases for the better implementation there is that we already have been implementing no-till for a long time, and a crucial point of no-till is have the cover crop there. So people are already used to the cover crop, right?
Right. Yeah, we consider no-till paramount. It's a criterion, the number one criterion. So not that crop livestock integration won't work if we don't use no-till, but we explore to its full potential when we have no-till. And in Brazil, we have about 50 years of no-tillage. So farmers already have very advanced no-till practices, crop rotation, cover crops. They are very good at it. So when we add animals to these systems, we already have a lot of roots making soil aggregation. We have soils with high levels of organic matter in some cases. Of course, in clay soils of the north, we have more organic matter than in the sandy soils of the south. But in all of them, we see great potential of improvement of soil health with animals, especially in those poorer soils with more sand. So that's why I think it's to what I'm seeing, according to what I'm seeing here in Florida, there is a huge potential of soil improvement from crop livestock integration.
Yeah, I remember talking to one of our colleagues, Denardin, once in Brazil, and I said, yeah, but it really doesn't affect a lot. It only increases a few percentage points. And he said, how does it not increase a lot? It doubles organic matter whenever you do something, because the soils are so sandy, there's so little organic matter that those few percentage points make a huge difference. Dubeux, you quoted Dr. David Wright last week, whenever he used to say, get your worst piece of land, and that's where you start the integration, and that's when you're going to see the most benefits. So that aligns with what Pedro is saying here, in the poorer soils receive the best benefits.
That's right. And David Wright has a huge legacy in the Southeast and had the vision 20 plus years ago, to start the integration of perennial grass into cropping systems. And he showed the value here with the sandy soils that you have and how important it is to build soil organic matter. And you're right, Marcelo. The soil here before David started was less than 1%. Today is 2.5%. So like you said, more than double the soil organic matter, which is huge. But it's great to have Pedro here so that you can learn from the experience they have there. Because Pedro here, the 5% that you mentioned is the whole cover crop area, but integrated with crops and livestock, it's a fraction of that, maybe 1% or 2% at the most. So I'm really curious, how did you guys get to the 30% there? And what's the profile of the folks that are doing that? Is that the same landowner that is doing the crop and the livestock? Are they partnering together? And what do they have different from the other folks that are not doing in terms of their characteristics? Are they more like business oriented? How would you say, from the experience that you learned there, to get to those 30%? If you get to 30% here, that would be great, right, Marcel?
Yeah, fantastic. This 30% are the estimates. Actually, there is data showing this from simulation, from models. HGLPF, which is a network of companies in Brazil, they made this estimation. And actually, when I was at CCGL, which is the cooperative I used to work at, I had the opportunity to build a questionnaire, and around 200 extension agents from all the 29 cooperatives all over the state. They answered some questions, and I got to the exact same number, 30%. Of course, depending on the place I was, the region of the state. So the profile, I'm not sure if I can say that most of them are in the land lease system. I think this is the right way to say. So usually, most of the times, the cattleman owns the land and rents to the soybean guy or the crop guy. And then it has a lot of arrangements, but most of the times it can use in the winter to feed some categories of the animals. So and of course there are also those who own the land, the animals, and the crop. And in this case, it's more simple, I would say, because you can decide all your practices. We're probably talking about system fertilization at some point of this conversation. And this is a thing that is way easier when you own the land, the cattle, and the animals. So you can think about the system when everything is yours. And when we talk about land leasing, it's a little more complex. I think it gets closer to your situation here in Florida. So the decisions are made by not only by the cattleman or the crop guy, but they must agree in some aspects. And sometimes these agreements do not favor the system functioning. And I used to say that on this 30% that the estimations show us, we have crop livestock duration, we cannot say how many of these operations are really, as I used to say, really integrated systems, or they are only a succession of crops and livestock without thinking about the system, without trying to optimize the resources. Because this is the real concept behind crop livestock integration, is to think about the system, is to optimize resources, is to think about the synergies of the crop and the animal, emergent properties, right, Marcelo? The thing you used to say, that 1 + 1 is not 2, but 3. This is the real aim, the real concept of crop livestock integration. I think this is a proxy of what happens there.
That's interesting, because it looks like here the land was converted to agriculture long time ago, and it's a little different there. It looks like you're still converting those cattle farms to agricultural land there, and that probably makes it easier, because now it's kind of trying to go back, from fully converted agricultural land and try to bring the cow back. It looks like those are differences in those two places, but that's interesting to learn that. And, there is always, the same possibility here. Still have a lot of cow farm that could be converted and use the integrated crop livestock systems. That
Yeah,
probably be easier because they have the cattle and they have the fences and the infrastructure in place.
Yeah, it is easier in terms of opportunities to think different kinds of systems and manage the system design, as we say. But it's not that simple. It has some complexity because we're talking about the most endangered biome in Brazil, which is the Pampas. So it's restricted to a small area in our state. So people usually don't think about it. So when they think about preserving nature and this kind of thing, people think in Amazon rainforest, but we have the Pampa grasslands there. And it's not that simple to convert the grasslands into croplands. It requires a lot of regulations and you must be careful with that. But yeah, once you can do that in the right way, you can build a system design that is very interesting.
Yeah, and I think we had different situations there where, for example, in my part of the country, my part of the state, traditionally we have our rice production and cattle, and normally that's in the same property. And normally the rancher owns the land and lease for rice for someone to plant, and it's not integrated. It's really not integrated. It's just in the past 10, 15 years that we started seeing a lot more rice paddies integrated with cattle grazing in the winter, and also putting some perennial forages, annual summer annual forages, some summer perennial forages there in rotation. But when we look into the northern part of the state, which equates to what we normally see in the Florida Panhandle in southern Georgia, that has been a traditional region for agriculture and has been a region, especially for wheat in the winter. Back in the days, went down. Now it seems like it's coming back because wheat prices were great or better. But in soybeans, and it expanded a lot. What is interesting to think about is one of the excuses that we often hear about, especially in sod-based rotation, is that because I have leased land, I cannot afford not planting. And sometimes we hear that even for the other types of integration. What we heard from multiple farmers that were participating in our workshop last week was that I cannot afford not having cattle. I cannot afford not having the cattle because the cattle became a crucial part of the system for those people that are integrated. And that's what we saw there in Brazil, right?
Yeah, that's right. So, and also there is the stability thing, right?
And that's why, the cattle is going to be the cash maker in many of the years, especially when there is a drought or something.
The cash maker. So there are different ways of building stability in the system. There is the cash making way. The diversification of income sources, which is obvious and very important. Our long-term results in on farm and also in our experiments show that cattle brings this resilience to the system. We have a lot of, here in Florida, you have more defined wet and dry seasons, right? Maybe I'm wrong, but this is what I'm noticing, more or less. But in our place in South Brazil, we have the rain is well distributed all over the year, but we have some very problematic summers, especially the summer. So we are coming from, in the last 5 summers, we had at least 4 very critical years with low productivities. And those who work with cattle were not extremely happy. They were fine. They were not losing money. And those working specifically with crops, they are in a bad situation right now. So this is one way of bringing stability to the system. And the other way, it's the biological way. So cattle adds stability because of all these new routes, this new nutrient flux that cattle brings to the system and makes it more stable by improving soil health and all this.
Yeah, and here in Florida, cotton is one of the major rotation crops that we have here, and the price of cotton is really, not helping recently. So people are, barely breaking even or making any money at all with cotton. So even on the money side, Marcel, I think, and I'm not even considering the current price of cattle because they're really high. But if you consider average price of cattle, you still probably make more money than cotton, plus all the soil health benefits that would come. I think last Friday in our symposium, I think I mentioned that one of the things that are happening is that the price of land is increasing, especially here in Florida, but in the Southeast in general, Georgia, Alabama as well. And, it's ranging anywhere, irrigated lands from, $7,000 to $9,000 per acre. And folks that put money on that, they want that to make 4 or 5%, to pay for the interest rates. And then they count on the land valuation with time, which has been the last 20 years or so been around 2.1%. But anyhow, if you put 4 to 5% on $8,000, let's say that's $320 to $350 of leasing per year. And it's hard to pay that only with the row crop. The row crop folks, if $200 to $250 is probably the ceiling for them to make it work. So that means that things are changing and we need to adapt, and perhaps bringing another system to the winter time that will pay for the cover crop and will leave benefits in terms of fertility, building soil health. Probably leave a little money, not a whole lot of money, but that will make the system to pencil out better. So in the economics, I think we need to think about that. Things are changing.
So whenever we think about land use efficiency, and as you mentioned, there is many ways to think about stability. There's many ways to think about the land use efficiency. When you start stacking those enterprises, can we go through the benefits? So you have the benefits of diversifying income, of course. You have the benefits for hedging against risk of commodity and input prices. So today we live in a world that commodity prices and input prices are determined by international markets. So fluctuations can really affect the bottom line beyond what we had been planned. So having multiple commodities will help on that. We also add one of the very interesting things that one of our speakers and participants mentioned. What is the main benefit for the crop folks is the improved in soil health and improve in nutrient cycling that the cattle bring to the crop. So we have actually the opportunity to improve crop production through the integrated system.
Yeah, and also to reduce input use, actually. This is one of the only ways I know that we can really produce more from the same molecule of a nutrient, since, as we know, animals are nutrient recyclers, right? Their work is their superpower is to recycle nutrients. So they produce all over the winter season, sometimes over the summer season. They make pasture grow more, right? If managed under adequate grazing management practices, and they don't export too much. Actually, they almost don't export nutrients. They leave everything there. They redistribute a little, but they don't export too many nutrients. While crops actually export a lot. So, and usually farmers are afraid of compromising crop yields by removing part of the nutrients from the seeding time and putting it into the pasture. But this is a way to improve resource use efficiency and reduce leaching problems and nutrient losses by runoff or leaching.
A lot of people that we talk to here that are, let's say, a little more skeptical about those systems. Some have even tried, and they'll tell us, well, the results are not there. I've tried a couple of years, did not work. Not for me, it doesn't work here. I know you faced a lot of that criticism and skepticism when you were working for the co-op in helping farmers to implement. So what was your experience for those folks that have seen negative results, or they believe in there are negative results? We'll talk about some of those, but also that they have implemented for a couple of years, didn't work, and quit.
Yeah, I used to say that we only can judge crop-livestock integration or any complex system that includes long-term rotations and system design. We need long-term data. We need the farmer can't judge the system from 1 year or 2 year experience. Sometimes this is not even a rotation cycle, depending on the kind of rotation they use. So I try always, every time I find this resistance, I try to show our long-term data, which is, again, comes from on-farm experiences and also from long-term paddock size, let's say that experiments. So we have some experiments back there in Brazil with more than 20 years of crop livestock integration showing the benefits and also debunking some myths about it. I think this is the greatest way to show it works, how it works, as your symposium, as the title of your symposium, how to make it work. So those that believe in this data and implement in their systems, they usually see these benefits. In some cases, it's more difficult than others, but those who believe that the research we do, and those who sometimes the neighbor is showing that it really works, and in these cases we can move forward.
So let's get into the myth busting here. Both of you in your presentations last week had a similar approach, similar slide of debunking some myths. What are the main myths that have been perpetuated, and why are they happening? How we can address those myths?
It was actually a coincidence, right, Dr. Dubeux? We did not agree about talking about the myths. I don't know if you want to start talking about the myths you have here, but I think they are pretty similar.
Yeah,
right?
I think a lot of those myths are common. And one of them is, okay, if you put cattle, that's gonna damage my crop yields, right? And it's been shown all over the place, not only here but also in Brazil and other places, that when you integrate crop and livestock systems, in most of the cases there are some improvement in crop yield. Our data here in Florida showing for peanut, for example, there was an improvement in crop yield. For cotton, there was no difference, but didn't hurt. It just didn't change. And Dr. David Wright showed, especially in the dry land, in the dry corners that he had in the pivot, there was a huge benefit of the integrated crop livestock systems. In the irrigated land, there were some years that were positive benefits for integration. Other years didn't change much. So that's one of them. And you can go over with compaction, for example. Maybe you can handle the compaction, soil compaction. That's another myth, Pedro.
Yeah, this is actually the most important myth. Actually, it's the number one in that questionnaire that I mentioned previously. I asked the extension agents to cite the main barriers, the main resistance issues they used to face in the field, and the number one was soil compaction. So I used to call these the zombie myths. This was actually an idea of our friend Peter Ballerstedt. He said you should call them the zombie myth. Yeah, this is right. This is pretty accurate actually, because we try to kill them with research data, with more than 20 years of research, and they are still there, always bothering us. So the number one myth is soil compaction, and it's pretty important, especially in our conditions there, because we have soil that go as far as 60, 65% of clay in the north. So this is the situation where I should be worried about soil compaction. And still, we don't see it when grazing management is appropriate in crop livestock integration. We have 23 years of data in a long-term experiment in a soil that has 54% of clay, and we never had yield losses caused by compaction. We see a little bit of compaction in the first 5 to 10 centimeters, depending on grazing intensity, which usually means sward height during the winter in a soybean and winter cover crop rotation. But this is easily reversible, that's the right word. It's easily reversible by during soybean seeding operations, also by the roots, especially when grazing management is great, when we use moderate grazing intensity. So this is the number one myth that we already debunked.
We're talking about in season, the same season, throughout the season, you already don't see more compaction.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's important to mention that soil organic matter has a negative relationship with compaction, right? With soil bulk density. So as we are building this organic matter, and we are building that with the crop livestock system integration, we are kind of going the opposite direction of compaction, right? So yes, it depends on the management. If you like overgraze and do mismanagement, especially in clay soils. Here in Florida, we have very sandy soils, so that problem is less of a problem here than there. But again, if you're building some organic matter time, I think the trend is your compaction to reduce. Actually, that's what our data shows here as well, that cover crop reduced compaction, grazing did not increase compaction. And the most compacted soil was the fallow, which was what 95% of the people do here. That's where the compaction.
That's right. Well, yeah. In our situation where we don't have grazing, we usually have cover crops, rye, oats, or other kinds of stuff. So usually we don't have there because we don't have this fallow situation in most of the systems. In some cases, in the rice system, in paddy fields we have. So it's another situation. But as you mentioned, every time we are adding animals to the system, we are increasing not only above ground mass productivity, but also root productivity. And this leads to soil aggregation. This leads to better water infiltration, so we don't lose water and nutrients by runoff. We increase organic matter. In these clay systems that I mentioned, we start with high levels of organic matter, but we still improve them. And in more sandy soils from the south, from the place Wallau comes, and I come also from the south, we experienced with integration associated with no-till there. In a matter of 2 years, we increased by 1 point the percentage of organic matter. So it's almost 50% in 2 years, and in 5 to 6 years, it improved by almost 75, 80%. So it's huge. It's very important. And these results, we can only see these results in the long run. Just to keep going with the list of zombie myths. The second one, for us there at least, is the problem that we are in systems that are building biomass on the soil for 50 years. As I said, we have 50 years of no-till implemented. So farmers definitely don't see with good eyes the idea of putting a herd there, eating this biomass and removing soil cover. So this is an issue. But again, if we plot in a graph data of above ground biomass in different grazing intensities and also in ungrazed systems, and soybean or crop productivity, we don't see a linear response. We actually don't see any response at all in these crop livestock systems, in these experiments that we have. It's not saying that cover crop biomass is not important. Of course not. It has a lot of benefits. But in these complex systems, the complexity, the biological complexity, and the ecosystem functioning that is added by the animals prevails over just a picture, a photography of a lot of biomass on top of the soil. So it's more complex than just saying the more we have biomass on top of the soil, the more productivity we are going to have. The third myth in order of importance is, as I said before, nutrient exportation, export. So animals do not export. The crops export a lot. And the fourth myth is the creation of heterogeneity. So we are in times that we have precision agriculture. So farmers like to see everything very, very homogeneous. The more homogeneous, the higher the productivities are going to be. But this is not true in crop livestock systems. So they are more heterogeneous because of the deposition of dung, of urine, these patches, these patterns that the animals create by the grazing itself or the deposition of these nutrients in a different way. But when we compare a field with animals and well-grazed cover crops, good grazing management practices, we see equivalent productivities or greater productivities where we have animals. Why? Because where we have dung patches, where we have urine patches, we have more soybean productivity or crop productivity. And where we don't have these patches, these dung and urine patches with more nutrient concentrations, the production is a little lower. But in the end, when you compare the whole plot, the whole field, there's no difference, or crop livestock integration performs better because of all these functioning, this different functioning.
Pedro, here I've heard, from some of those folks doing the integration that one of the benefits is that the row crop farmer is reducing the fertilizer bill by 20-30% because of all the nutrient cycling that happens during the cattle phase. So do you have any data, any information from southern Brazil where, we're trying to start a new project here to try to see, how much the nutrient legacy, but I know you guys are ahead of us in terms of the concept of system fertilization. So I'd like to explore some of that concept here with us.
Yeah, this is very promising. This is very promising data and a very interesting idea, which is, as I said, the component that exports more nutrients from the system is the crop, right? So the animals are just basically recycling. This is their superpower, as I said. And so it makes way more sense to start putting the nutrients prior to pasture establishment or in the pasture, where animals are going to use that nutrient to grow, to produce beef or milk. The pasture grows more in every dung spot, every urine spot, and then all the nutrient is there for the crop. So this concept called system fertilization we're working on that in South Brazil. There are actually some experiments and also some on-farm experiences that we have where the farmers put all the nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, everything in the cover crop phase, so in the pasture, and they seed the soybean, the maize, or the rice with only the seed. They didn't put a kilogram of the nutrient in the summer, and they have the same or more productivity in that land. Actually, there is an experiment that is in its 6th or 7th year testing this system fertilization approach, and we didn't see differences in the first 2 years in the productivity, in soybean productivity, but the pasture produced 1 to 2 tons more biomass in the winter. In the 4th year, it produced almost 3 tons more pasture and 4 to 5 bushels per acre of soybean more in the system approach. And in the 5th year, it produced about the same biomass, so 3 to 4 tons of ryegrass more in the winter and almost 10 bushels per acre of soybeans in the summer, using the same amount of fertilizer, comparing with the conventional way of fertilizing the system, which is putting the nutrients during soybean seeding. So this is very promising. This is the best translation to improve nutrient use efficiency. So we make more using less nutrients.
That's very interesting. So if the cattle pays for the cover crop and the fertilizer, there will be a huge gain for the crop.
Or at least
the crop phase.
Or at least if they make some kind of arrangement, they split these costs. There's a lot of ways to do this, and I know farmers that pay for the whole fertilizer. In some cases, the farmer agrees to put part of the fertilizer in the winter. So that there are lots of ways to do it. As we saw in the workshop and in the symposium, this relationship, it's very important. Also, the trust between the cattleman and the farmer. So if the farmer understands the purpose of this system fertilization, he trusts that the cattleman is not going to overgraze during the winter and damage the crop. So it's easier to happen, right? To make it happen.
And talking about fertilization, one of the important things here for us in Florida in terms of environmental conservation is nitrates in the water because of our massive aquifer system and at the same time very, very sandy soils, which are very prone to leaching. So the research we have been doing, Dr. Bay has been doing there, and Mariana showed that whenever we put cover crops, especially when we graze cover crops, we're grabbing a lot of that nitrogen that otherwise would be lost, putting it in the pasture, and potentially having it for the next crop. So it's a big opportunity for recycled nutrients here as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Marcelo. And it's amazing because you're comparing, even if the fallow that doesn't receive any, nitrogen in the winter time, we just try to mimic the fallow system, which is just the do nothing, right? Just leave the land there, don't apply anything. And then the system that we are grazing, some of the treatments, they're receiving 80 pounds of nitrogen during the winter time. But even though receiving 80 pounds of nitrogen, there is less leaching in that system compared to the fallow system. The main reason is that, that nitrogen is helping to, to grow those plants, to grow the roots, and it's building up soil organic matter. And in fact, this nitrogen is being tied up in the soil organic matter. That's where the nitrogen is going. We're trying to find where this nitrogen going, and it ends up that it's going to the soil organic matter. So, and that's all that we need here in this sandy soil that we have in Florida.
Fantastic. And nutrients are very important also because our projects are partially financed, including this episode here, is partially financed by the Florida Department of Agriculture, Agriculture and Consumer Services, Office of Agricultural Water Policy. They have invested a lot in us on those conservation system, and they are seeing that this can be really the future, or one of the futures of sustainable agriculture in Florida. Another thing I want to mention is for those interested in learning more about integrated crop livestock systems, and also to learn more about the conversations we have been having here, access our social media, UF-IFAS Forage team. You can also find a lot of information in the Southeastern Grazing Exchange website, which is a portal for networking. So where you can find farmers and ranchers that are willing to lease land or bring cattle to your land. For more information, contact us at forages@ifas.ufl.edu. That is forages@ifas.ufl.edu. Or contact our local extension agent. We have a fantastic network of agents in Florida that can help you in those complex questions of how to implement integrated crop livestock systems.
I just want to thank Pedro for bringing his expertise. So that was a very enlightening week for us that, we've been learning from the experience. And I hope we can start promoting more and more of these integrated crop livestock systems in our region here as well. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you, Marcelo.
Pedro, any last words here?
No, actually, I just want to thank you, Dr. Dubeux, Dr. Wallau. So it's been an amazing week here with you. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be here with you, exchanging some experiences, learning with you, and also bringing some of my experiences as an early career researcher, but it's at least 10 years of research in crop livestock integration. And well, I'm very happy to be here with you. And also I see great potential in crop livestock integration in Florida. So I hope we can help more in the future. Thank you.
You bet. I appreciate you coming here and bringing your experience and also the legacy that our group has been developing. I'm saying our group because I still feel part of the group that Paula developed here, and it's part of my formation too. So I appreciate all that. Looking forward to talk more. And actually, we didn't even talk about grazing management. That will come in the next episode. Thank you, everybody, for listening to us today. Thank you, Dubeux. Thank you, Pedro, for being here with us.
Thank you.
For more information on our variety trials or about this podcast, please contact us through the email forages@ifas.ufl.edu. That is forages@ifas.ufl.edu. You can also find more information in our IFAS webpage for the forage team. Just put on your search engine IFAS forage team and you'll find a lot more information about the work we developed for corn silage and many other forages. This podcast was brought to you by the University of Florida IFAS forage team with support from the Faculty Instructional Resource and Support team from the College of Agriculture and Life Science. This episode was produced by Marcelo Wallau, Olivia Mowley, and Ashley Kanabrowski.